Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion on how COVID has affected RF planning and the work environment. Our topic kind of needs a little bit of introduction, or little introduction actually, because we're certainly all coping with some form of changes to both our personal and our work lives. Today, we brought together a panel of industry leaders and professionals to explore the changes that they have seen in our industry, as well as changes that have occurred within their own companies. So let's get a quick introduction from our panelists. And Flo, welcome to the panel.
Hi there. Yeah, great to be joining you today. I am joining actually from Madrid in Spain. I'm normally based in London. I work for a company called CARTO. We are a local intelligence platform. We help different companies, verticals, telco, utilities, spatial decisions. So decisions that are related to data. And very often that is to do with planning. So I think I'm very happy today to talk about how our business customers' problems have changed.
Thank you. And Vikas, how are you today?
Hey, fantastic, Rory. Thanks for asking. So just as a quick introduction to everybody, my name is Vikas Trehan. I'm with Nokia. I assume everybody knows that name. And so I'm responsible for Nokia's enterprise go-to-market through the partners in the channel for the North American market. And Nokia has a wide variety of portfolio, as many of you may be aware of. We sell from IP routers to optical to wireless networks. And certainly we are living in an interesting time, like you said, Rory, and happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And Lauren, how about yourself?
Hi, Rory. Everyone, hi. My name is Lauren Lickey. I'm the CEO of EDX Wireless, and just very excited to be on this panel to discuss with Vikas and Flo kind of what we've been seeing in COVID and what we've been seeing in our own business with respect to transitions, and certainly an appropriate time to be having this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very relevant in everyone's lives at this point. So I'm glad that everyone could join us today and sort of start talking about some of these topics. So just to jump right in and start off, I'll sort of be going back and forth between different questions and kind of feel free to discuss amongst yourselves here, as this is a discussion panel, any of the topics that come up while we talk about it. So I'm actually going to throw this first question over to Flo. So how has your company been coping with COVID and supporting your customers?
Well, I think at the beginning it was obviously a massive shock to the system, but actually being a tech and software company, we felt quite well prepared to make this switch to remote. And we actually went remote before the lockdowns even kicked in any of the countries where we're present, because we saw the direction that this was going in. So really we have a series of software solutions that we use internally that make it really easy. I mean, the classic kind of Slack, Zoom stuff, but then also we use solutions like Envision to be able to collaborate with design teams, etc. So actually, we've seen an uplift in productivity, which actually in terms of supporting our customers is probably great for them, because it means support tickets are resolved faster. If they have a question about something that they need to do with our platform, they're getting more help even than usual. So, I mean, what we're just seeing, though, is that our customers' problems have changed overnight. Think about real estate, for example. Real estate's a huge vertical for us in terms of commercial real estate portfolio management. Where should I invest in co-working spaces, or where should I invest in industrial real estate for data centers? And that's all changed because demand is changing in a big way. And that reflects through to all of our telco customers as well, telecoms customers. With people moving out of city centers or moving into their holiday locations, that's completely changed the way that connectivity has to be thought about. And so some of our telecoms customers are doing some pretty sophisticated projects to understand customer mobility patterns and to see, for example, in a country like Spain or France or the UK, everybody's moving out to the mountains, countryside, beaches. How do they deal with those changes in demands? So we're feeding them in a different way, I think, to our customers, but it's definitely been a learning curve.
Yeah, definitely. Is that something, you mentioned some of the internal tools that you're using and the remote nature that the world sort of is at this point. Did you have any sort of remote infrastructure in place prior to COVID, outside of the typical communication tools, or is that something that you've had to sort of adapt to, or bring on new rules or new tools to actually accomplish?
Yeah, we were actually pretty well prepped for remote because actually a big chunk of our company are developers, and so actually having the possibility to have remote options opens us up to a much larger talent pool. And I'm sure every company is seeing that right now as they're thinking about hiring plans, if they are thinking about hiring plans. We don't really believe in having very rigid rules with remote working, and if anything, with people who've been juggling kind of childcare circumstances, you have to give your employees more flexibility through this. And there's no point, I've seen some horror story articles about plugins that you can put in on staff's computer to make sure they're actually working and stuff. That's just totally not our approach and not the way to do this. It's about trust. It's about being clear about what the goals are. We actually, at the beginning of COVID, we were having kind of 2 all-company meetings for half an hour a week, just sharing updates on what we were seeing. That's now, we've reduced the number of meetings because people have got used to this new normal. And we just try our best to communicate everything transparently, talk about how the quarter is looking, what we're seeing with our customers. And actually, we're now thinking about doing more remote hiring because for the next year, our company policy is that we're not going back to the office until there's a vaccine. So it's a very different year that awaits us in terms of talent and hiring.
Wow, that's a pretty large change to go essentially all remote at this point for the company.
I should say that we're obviously, if you want to, I'm in the office right now, in fact, you have the choice. So some people, there's a spectrum of feelings about this. Like some people want to get back in because they live in a really small apartment or with housemates or with lots of children and a dog, and they just want to get back into the office and have some space. But some people really don't feel comfortable with it or need to use mass transit. So we're just doing what's best for the employee and asking them how they feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Vikas, have you sort of seen the same sort of switch to remote, or I guess for you, how has COVID been affecting you and the company, and how have you sort of made sure to ensure customer support and success while dealing with all these changes?
Yeah, so we are in a slightly different business than what Flo just mentioned, right? Because as a Nokia, we produce both hardware and software, and we are in a physical installation of the networks out in the field. So we had to definitely adjust ourselves. So obviously, if you look at across the different organizations of Nokia, software engineers that are happy to work from home, and pretty much everybody's working from home. Hardware ASIC designers, a lot of work can be done from home, but at the end of the day, when you have to put the whole system together, like a hardware software, some people have to go in the lab, but there are being precautions taken. There is a schedule, who can go in, when can go in, what are the checks. So we try to keep that to minimal, but for the hardware people, they still have to, mechanical people, they have to go in the lab, to set up these, the boxes that the networking equipment that we make. But out on the sales side where I am, I think I would say, we had to adjust also ourselves. For example, we have executive briefing centers and demo lab tours and stuff. We had to, make them all virtual. So, because we can't host the customers in our executive briefing center. So we had, to go virtual on there. So there was some time spent at the beginning of March, April to set us for that because our customers want to see some of those technologies, which is cannot be all put in the cloud because of the nature of the products that we build. And but as Flo mentioned, obviously a lot of customer meetings are virtual on the phone and using Zoom or WebEx or Teams, what have you. And I think that's working out well. But then we do have our field installation people who are deemed as essential workers, because if AT&T's network is down, or a public utility network, or a public safety network, we have to be out in the field and get those things taken care of. So so it's been a mixed bag for us, because we can't go all remote like a pure software company. So but we're driving to strike the the optimal balance without obviously putting people at risk or harm's way. Now, when it comes to customer, many of the customers that we have up in the utilities, like in the New York area, when they were the first hard hit, they kind of shut down. So, they won't even host the vendors in their meeting rooms and stuff. So some of the meetings were happening in the parking lots, we just have to be creative to do what we can do, because Nokia's policy won't allow us to host a customer, and customers are not letting vendors come in their location. So, but you have to keep the networks up and running, right? So we just have to be creative to take care of that.
Right, right. Lauren, how has EDX been handling the COVID situation and supporting the customers?
Well, as you know, Rory, this has kind of been an interesting experience for us. I mean, we honestly, in a lot of ways, got lucky as a company. Being a small business in Eugene, Oregon, that has already been, bringing on more employees remote, or having employees that are making a decision to move to another city. But when you have great people, you want to keep them on, and so starting to enable remote work. And then I myself, based in Austin, Texas, working remote. It's been a thing that we were getting more and more comfortable to, but then, Flo, as you mentioned, prior to everything really being shut down, it really became clear that we were going to need to do something. And so we had a big initiative within the company to practice working from home, because we know there's going to come a point where we're going to need to probably end up shutting the office down. So people who have a desktop machine that need a laptop so they can bring it home, let's get them a laptop. Let's start working from home 1-2 days a week, start, making sure that when it's time, we're ready to go. And that ended up paying off pretty well for us. But, there's also all kinds of things like getting on the phone with our bank and making sure that we're able to keep signing checks, even though, our office manager and check signers might be in different locations. Like, we have to keep, paying our vendors and making sure things go out the door. It's been quite an interesting experience to see how it shifted. On the customer side, everybody's going through the same thing. And as a software tools vendor, enabling engineers to plan RF networks, and RF networks have been in the middle of a lot of this, where as population is shifting into different regions because work and school is happening at home, adjustments are needing to be made, plans are needing to be changed, and they needed access to those tools. And so one of the things we saw is that from within the company, an idea that says, hey, can we take our cloud-based licensing system, for example, and just make it available to everybody? Customers need to be able to get access to the software. They weren't previously prepared to be able to use this application outside of their four walls of the office. We've got some tools, we've got some things we can do. Can we make a difference here? And that ended up working out really well. We've been able to turn that on for a pretty significant chunk of our customer base, to be honest with you, and help them through this period. And very happy to do that. I mean, at the end of the day, we're only successful when our customers are able to use the tools. And when a pandemic comes out of left field and changes everybody's work patterns and environments, we all have to adapt. We got to help each other out.
Yeah, absolutely. And from that perspective, you mentioned this cloud licensing option. I think Vikas mentioned something about having meetings in parking lots. And Flo, you mentioned having a much stronger or a more focused remote workforce at this point. Has COVID forced any other outside of the box thinking and innovation that has sort of come about just in the past few months that you've had to create or build to sort of deal with the effects of COVID and the strategies behind what exactly it is that you've done?
One thing that comes to mind for me here at CARTO, the big part of the offering to our customers is, as well as providing analytics software, like location analytics software, we also provide different types of location data streams, data sets. And so traditionally that might be like human mobility, road traffic, credit card transaction data, weather data, any number of things. But it became also quite clear that every industry was soon going to need to be able to have easy access to COVID-19 related data, to do with cases, to do with deaths, to do with local lockdowns, to do with countries, which ones don't allow travel or not. Because if suddenly your company has to start traveling again, you need to know, okay, can this person actually go to France or go to Australia, wherever it might be. And so one of the adjustments that we made quite fast was to actually work in those data streams from, excuse the ambulances in the background, to work in the different data streams available from Johns Hopkins, available from CDC, loads of different sources, and we've worked very closely with Google, the Google BigQuery team to make that available through our platform. And it's crazy that pretty much every vertical is looking at this data from a different angle or perspective, whether that's to do with reopening brick and mortar stores in retail, whether that's to do with pharmaceutical companies having to adapt their supply chain in line with local legislation. Everybody needs that data. So that's one thing I would say. I don't know if Lorne and Vikas have got any other cool examples.
Yeah, so if I look at the industries that we serve, there are a couple of examples that I can tell you that, so for example, to your point, Floyd, as the market as the economy is opening up and people, whether it's a sporting venue, whether it's a Disney park, or whether it's just some of the manufacturing plants, because manufacturing people still, it's one of those jobs that have to be done on premise and things like that. So, and as some of these industries are opening up, so once again, there are need for this access crowd health solution, right? So for example, there has been already some innovation about, worker health safety kind of, there are badges out there that you can put on a, whether it's a smart hat or a smart jacket or, a wearable that, you want to measure the health of the ongoing health of the employee. And it's been in some of those hard hat kind of industries, whether it's refinery, utility, oil and gas and things like that. But we are seeing that adoption of that more and more in other verticals as well. And the reason is, in addition to monitoring their health, obviously you want to check their temperature and stuff as they come into work, but you also want to make sure with the geolocation that there's not a crowd happening in a particular manufacturing floor or, within a Disney park or something like that. So, so we are using some of the technology that's been around to solve the COVID-related problem from overcrowding and temperature detection and things like that. So that's one area that we have seen that is coming up, and we are innovating there by providing some of our video analytics solution, providing our networking solution over this large area to have a reliable network. But then also in many areas of the industry, many segments, they want to automate more and more to again have less people on the job floor, whether it is ports with the straddle carriers, whether it's self-driving vehicles inside the mines, whether it is, intermodal, rail yards and things like that. So, they are adopting more and more networking technologies to automate as much as they can. And that's what we call private wireless networks. So a lot of industries, enterprises are building their own private wireless network for that automation, so that they, obviously there is a benefit long term anyway for automation, but in the near term, they want to expose people less and less by automating more and more. So definitely this is, making us all think out of the box and see how we can leverage our technology, our solution to solve some of the current needs.
Yeah, it's interesting because the impact and the adjustments are so different across different companies. We see different problems, things like that. I think one of the more creative things that has been happening within EDX is that as we've seen these shifts in the market and kind of some of the churn in employment and situations like that, we've looked at it and said, well, what can we do here? I mean, at the end of the day, engineers need to use our tools in order to get their jobs done. But, with remote work and with, budget adjustments and things like that, we said, well, what could we do? And so we ended up putting up a job board for, RF engineers to say, hey, look, let's just try and find some jobs. Let's connect people. And the thing that's surprising about that is, it didn't turn into a ton of job postings, but what it did do is it established more relationships between EDX and its users. And, we've actually been building now a substantial subject matter expert pool of people who've been using the software for a long time, very familiar with the industry, with the market, and it's allowing us to kind of scale up and down some of our own, pool of resources for, getting insight on training materials and development of content and kind of helping us move our business forward to make sure it's kind of really well aligned with what the market needs. And, at the end of the day, it's just kind of a very creative solution to, changing demands. And we've thrown hundreds of contract hours out towards, our users in our community to help build a better tool. And it's one of those things that, when you're in an interesting situation and you start trying things and doing things different, you end up stumbling upon great solutions that you otherwise may not have run into.
Absolutely. Yeah, it sounds like everyone here has sort of found, different levels or even in some cases new products for helping to cope with COVID. So, we've kind of talked about specifically what we've done personally or in our own companies, but your industry as a whole is kind of also having to cope with COVID. So what would you say you've seen as far as, has there been a different approach to business? Has there been a normal approach to how the industry is doing business? And also, do you think, there's been a positive or a negative effect, or maybe even just a neutral effect surrounding the industry with the effects of COVID?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Vikas, you go for it.
No, please. Ladies first.
See, this is an effect of COVID. If we were in person, this wouldn't be so difficult, but we're in a Zoom room. So the thing I was going to say is, in terms of changing the way we do business, and I'm pretty sure this will be across most industries. I'm sure all of us here are familiar with this kind of going off to a trade show, meeting customers and partners in person. A big part of the buying process was being able to meet your customers and your vendors face to face. As a marketeer myself, I'm seeing that that's going to shift immensely. We normally do a big conference every year called the Spatial Data Science Conference, which we've moved to be online in October. And we are already starting to think that if in May this isn't looking good, that we might have to go online next year as well, or push to later in the year. But I think it's that change in the buying process is going to be seen across every industry. It's a very difficult time to own a big conference venue or to work in the conference space, for sure. And yeah, I think it will make the buying process sometimes more efficient. As much as people like to go on a jolly to Las Vegas for a big conference, I think actually people are going to have the time to spend less time on a plane, more time with their families. And actually what you're going to want from a salesperson or from a vendor is just an efficient process where you say, how does your product stand against the competitor, explain pricing, explain how we can approach this use case together. And that process will change. And I don't know if it's the same so much in the RF planning industry. What do you guys think?
In RF, It's interesting. You don't want to say that like, oh, things are great, but it really is surprising. I mean, the data we're seeing come back from the use of the tools right now indicates that at least in some segments, we've got the most engineering activity going on from any time in the last few years, right? And it's not crazy hockey stick or anything like that, but it indicates that there is a lot of work being done right now. It's the world locked down, but it didn't stop working, and there's work that needs to be done to adapt to the changing situation. And so this massive shift from working in the middle of the city core and going to schools and doing this mass education to now everybody's at home, everybody's doing school from home, they all have their own private connections, and it's created such a shift in demand that like we said before, adjustments have to be made. And at the end of the day, things like in the United States, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, RDOF, dropping tens of billions of dollars into providing increased access, really can't come soon enough. And so we're seeing activity from that. We have a partner in that space, BCTI, who is working with cities and communities to help do quick and rapid evaluations of what can be done to make adjustments in planning to increase capacity. And we're really happy that we're a part of that we're enabling and helping there. But so like I said, it's one of those things where you say, wow, we are in a recession, things are bad. You don't want to say it's good, but at the same time, there are places where there's a lot of work and activity happening. It's just maybe not exactly where people expected it to be.
Yeah, no, I would second that, Lorna. I mean, we are seeing a lot of opportunity because Nokia, we provide obviously wireless network, but also the fiber optic networks, the GPON networks that are used for the fiber to the home kind of thing. So we are seeing a lot of opportunity, both from a smart city point of view, but rural broadband for the RDOF funds that you mentioned, but also many school districts who are trying to build their private wireless networks all around the nation right now because they're beneficiary of the CARES Act right now, because I think more and more universities, higher ed and K through 12, are coming to a realization that we may not be going back to school for another full year. I was reading the news this morning about Hong Kong. They are saying now they're coming across a third wave. So, forget about the first wave, is second, and now it's the third wave. So we may be in this situation for another year, and schools and universities are really planning towards, how we gonna operate in this kind of environment for a full another year. And so we are definitely seeing opportunities. But the other interesting thing, Flo, you mentioned about marketing and demand generation and stuff. But other aspect is human resources. So I'm in the midst of hiring some resources. How do you onboard a person? In pre-COVID, you would meet the person in person. You would have a training for that person when they're onboarding. You would take them to the field on a trip to meet the joint customers and the partners and things like that. Now, onboarding is a major challenge that I'm faced because you have to build that relationship all over the phone and the video meetings. It's not, let's go, break some bread and have a cocktail and, get to know each other kind of, it's all virtual now. So now how do you build, servicing your existing customers is one thing, but, coming on board as a new employee, building a relationship within the company and with your customer base and driving business, I mean, that presents its own challenges.
Yeah, especially for more junior resources. I mean, I run the SDR team at CARTO, most of them are like fresh out of university, and a big part of the onboarding process is sitting in the room with them and being able to walk through our pitch and walk through how you speak to customers on the phone. And it's going to be tough remotely, but everybody is doing it. It will be interesting to emerge. But I completely agree. I miss that component of getting to know colleagues or new people onboarding, just like the corridor conversation or the water cooler moment. I think most of us miss that as well.
Absolutely.
I think we'll all have one big kind of group hug together when we can finally come back, right? in companies and as a team, and it will be a happy day for all of us.
Yeah.
Kind of on that train of thought. I mean, has there been anything that you or your company has done to sort of try to fill in that gap? I mean, obviously, direct human interaction is a lot different than just a video chat. But are there any sort of fill-in events or meetings or anything like that? Any sort of activities that you've been doing to sort of create that team building and create that interaction between the internal customers that you have and the internal employees that you work with?
I think it's a very tricky one, that, because at the beginning of the lockdown, we really did try our best with that. So we would have the odd happy hour, some quizzes, stuff like that. But I think everybody's got to a point where like Zoom fatigue is a real thing. And I think people are spending, certainly in our world, maybe 5 to 6 hours on video calls per day. The last thing you really feel like is jumping on another Zoom call or GoToWebinar or whatever it might be. So that's been a tricky one, and I don't know how we'll be able to replace that kind of personal component going forwards, but I'd be interested to hear how you guys have been dealing with that one at your companies.
Again, no real physical meetings or something. First, the team is distributed all over the US and Canada, right? So we can't come together anyways. But I try to do is use our team meetings as a movement, like if it's a 1-hour team meeting, just catch up on the miscellaneous topics. How was the weekend? How was your activities? Because there are people who are still engaged in some outdoor activity, like a round of golf or something, some lighter movements just to as if we were all together having a big team meeting and, going for a happy, not the video happy hour kind of thing that you were referring to, but, just using the team meetings for lighter movements before we dive into the work. Because to your point, everybody's just sick and tired of, 7 to 5 or 6, whatever, all day being on these calls. And because when you do work in person, yes, you work hard, but then you always, when you go out for dinner or something, you always enjoy those lighter moments, getting to know each other. So I think I'm trying as my best to keep that going so that we don't get stressed out or, burnt out from these calls,
Yeah, I mean, I think that you really are spot on there with respect to, I don't know, embracing a little bit of inefficiency in meetings, and that's something that is horrible to hear, I think, because people hate meetings in the first place, right? But it's understanding that all of those impromptu conversations, in the hallways and between offices, just they're not happening, and they need to happen. You need to have the exchange of ideas. You need to have a back and forth and debates about pub trivia somewhere, sometime.
Correct.
And so, reserving a little bit of flexibility in your agenda is a good thing, providing some margin in your work life. I mean, beyond that, at EDX, this is a problem or an opportunity, whichever way you want to look at, that we're really kind of continuing to stay focused on. I mean, we have, recently just kind of officially made the decision and the declaration that we're just going to go ahead and be a remote first company, because we already have so many employees working remote or working from home, and we do have an office, but we really have to figure out how to make sure that everyone in the company, no matter where they're located, has the same kind of opportunities and inclusion and support that they're going to get if they were in the main office. And so that's, not just looking at, are they getting attention from like a performance and, management perspective, but also, are they included in, what's going on in the office and in activities and, those sorts of things. We used to do pub crawls every month, when I'd come into, the Eugene office to say hi, and we'd all go out and have a drink or two. And then we did one on a Zoom call, and that was fun. And but now it's let's keep looking at it, like you said, Flo. I mean, can we do kind of quiz and trivia times? Can we do other things, whatever it is? But just make sure that we keep getting better at it, because this is the new normal. This is the future, and we need to make sure that it is, good for everyone.
And if I may just, Lauren, there's somebody from my team was the other day, he just asked, because we are 4 months away from election in US. And normally in the normal circumstances, we would be sitting in a bar listening to debate and, having an argument or something like that. I mean, right now, it just doesn't even feel like we are that close to our election in US here,
Yeah, no, I agree that opportunity to, I don't know, discuss and debate back and forth amongst friends and coworkers is really lacking. I mean, we debate agenda items and action points and things like that, but not what we're really thinking and feeling, and that's a shame. We really need to work on providing the space for that.
Correct.
Here in the UK, it's kind of the other way around. Like a few months ago, before COVID, everybody was really willing to change the topic from Brexit. But now I think everybody would rather just go back and talk about Brexit than continue to talk about COVID. So it's a similar thing, but the other way around.
And in British, I mean, in England, I mean, pubs is such a culture, right? Everybody has a beer or two before hopping on the train back home. I mean, that's culture there. I mean, it definitely has changed the way we live and work, and we just have to embrace it and do our best to make it as normal as we can.
Totally agree.
Yeah, so with all of those changes, the trying to figure out that or solve that $1 million problem of how do we have human interaction, I think you've all brought up a lot of good points, the pub trivia, the different things, and I don't know if that's one that's going to be solved on this call today, but it's definitely one that I think everyone is going to be interested in to keep an eye on as we progress over the next question mark of time through COVID. So switching gears a little bit, and I think a few of you have touched on this or brought up some things. Lauren, you mentioned a licensing item that you're using to assist with customers. And Flo, I think you mentioned some data products that you've developed as well. And so with everyone being sort of this distributed workforce and having that problem of not being able to be in the office together or not being able to have that in-person interaction, and we're all kind of video sharing from home. Do you think managed services or cloud services, like you've described, are something where they can be advantageous for companies to look at? And sort of what does that kind of look like in today's world?
Absolutely. I mean, the collaboration component that the cloud delivers to our customers is extremely powerful, especially, I mean, GIS as industry in particular, for a long time has been a very desktop-based, siloed from the business area in many cases, particularly in the public sector. And so the managed services, cloud, and also connectivity to other platforms that customers already have, whether that's Databricks, Google, BigQuery, the other business intelligence tools that you're using within an organization. I think it is really important to every enterprise organization out there right now. And as I mentioned earlier, it's just the use cases are changing. The questions that they're being asked are so very different. I mean, one of our biggest verticals traditionally has been retail and also outdoor media. And so our outdoor media customers, it's been a really tough time for them because people have not been outdoors. They were giving away inventory to help people. And in the UK, the phrase was stay at home, and then it changed to stay alert, and that was everywhere on billboards. And so that their business changed overnight. So certainly seeing a shift in the use cases. And I mean, there's still a large number of enterprise customers who still need an on-premise offering. And we still work to support them with that, and our support team are really geared up for that. But those are the trends we're seeing.
I think yes, managed services is extremely helpful in a time like this, and ultimately, I view managed services as a decision to focus more of your attention onto your core business. And, when all of the extra things that a company has to do, become even more difficult in a time like this, then it's time to kind of refocus things and look at, where are we spending our time and effort? What is our core business? What do we do? And what can we work with someone else to have them do, because they have a service that they can manage and they can deliver better than we can ourselves. And so, for our business working in software tools, this is an area that is, really important and where we can always improve. You brought up the licensing component. It's a question of where can we reduce the burden of IT management for our applications? How can we improve performance and enable customers to put more of their time into their business of RF planning rather than into our software, right? And so it's something that has ended up working well for us. It, again, wasn't expecting everyone to suddenly work from home, but when you're building the right tools, when you're focusing on these core problems that are a part of our business, right, then it comes in handy, and you create that preparation meets opportunity, and it's luck, right? It works out well for the customers as well.
Yeah, so if I was to take similar examples from a Nokia perspective, right? So to your point, Lorna, we are trying to see what can we minimize and the jobs that were traditionally done on the site by whether it's license management, so for example, we have taken our private wireless and we put some of our core network and the network management in the cloud, so that we have less to do on site and more can be done remotely from the cloud, right? And so again, those are the kind of things that we are all every day trying to innovate and see how we can automate. Of course, there is, like I said, our nature of our business is somebody has to be on site to install the radios and the networks and stuff like that, and but still we are trying to put as much in the cloud as we can when it comes to the capability itself.
Yeah, and from that cloud perspective, and Vikas, when you're doing these changes or these switches from a service that wasn't cloud-based or that wasn't managed to one that is, what is is there any cost benefit, or is it primarily just getting the job moved over to a cloud type service?
No, I mean, there are definitely cost benefits as well. Obviously, for some industries, it shifts from a CapEx to an OpEx model, which they prefer. Not every industry wants that. Utility prefers CapEx, but many industries prefer that, and they can also go into subscription in the sense, I'll commit 6 months, 1 year versus putting all the outlay up front. So there are definitely inherent cost model advantages to cloud-based solutions. And second, when for example, we had announced a partnership with Microsoft Azure for our, private wireless networking. It also gives them the ability to put more and applications on the same, Azure Edge platform versus installing separate boxes for each application. So, so there are both cost, advantages as well as, other advantages as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that cost in cloud solutions is a really interesting question, and there are changes inevitably, and it kind of depends on the situation and the value prop being delivered. I kind of look at it in a couple different ways. One is, if the cloud solution that you're going to is providing a multi-tenant shared resource implementation of an application that already exists, then you are definitely going to expect to see costs go down. That's kind of what we've seen take place across multiple industries. where all of a sudden everybody's accessing applications in the browser. They're all on shared resources on the back end. You can see the cost improvement for the customer. On the other side, if the cloud solution is ultimately providing, net new capabilities that are enabled by this new architecture that previously couldn't exist under traditional architectures, then you really end up in a price discovery mode where, both the, customer and the vendor are working together to understand the value of the new solution that's being delivered and finding that, attractive ROI target where you say, okay, here you go. Now we have this new thing that didn't exist before. You couldn't get it anywhere. And here's what your price is. And that's a good thing, because at the end of the day, these new technologies and solutions that are coming to market on top of cloud-based managed service architectures are ones that ultimately deliver consistently, across industry after industry, very attractive ROIs. And this is a thing that we've seen play out at EDX in multiple situations as we've started to move things into the cloud. I mean, just as an example, when we came out with our Cirrus data subscription service, that really kind of changed the game from a GIS data perspective for RF planning. The ability to use our proprietary encryption technology to kind of take a cloud-hosted database and kind of download for specifically planning purposes within our application for just a lease term without having to pay for the entire life of that data set, dramatically reduce costs for customers who are able to find, this standard data set is directly meeting the needs of what they need to go and plan. And, as we continue to innovate, as, companies continue to push things into the cloud, you're going to go through this process over and over again. What is the value prop I'm providing? Am I lowering costs through shared resources and multi-tenancy? Am I providing net new capabilities and driving new value propositions? Where are we going? And it's a space where it's interesting and it's fun and it's exciting to be a part of.
Yeah, so in that space of, the data and you mentioned licensing and Vikas with your implementations on Microsoft Azure, I think a big question that comes up surrounding any sort of cloud service is always the data security, or just security in general, right? Companies and individuals are sort of maybe apprehensive or a little bit worried about what's going to happen with their data or what the security level is. So what sort of security is there, or what measures are in place to ensure that my data is secure when I'm using these cloud or managed services?
Yeah, so from a Nokia's solutions point of view, right, if we look at the networking, private infrastructure, right, private wireless network on a port or a, rail yard or a utility windmill farm and stuff like that, yes, absolutely, they don't want the data to leave the premise, right, because this is their data. But the control plane in the networking industry and the data plane it can be split, and that's what we have done. So the data plane where the customer's data stays on site. So what we do is we put a box called a edge box. Everybody knows about the edge computing now. So we have an edge box which is running a Microsoft Azure platform, and our core is one of the applications that is running on it. So that data will stay on premise, on site, and not leave. Is the control plane, the management of that network, which is in the cloud, which is very acceptable to the customer. So that's what we have done. We have done a split architecture of the data and the control plane to ensure the data security of the customer.
So I'd say, when it comes to the security and the management of customer data, it is something that you always have to put at a highest level of priority, and look at how you bake that into your architecture itself. I love the example Vikas on the Nokia side in terms of saying, from a systems architecture perspective, how are we designing for security in the implementation of this solution, right? And for our part on the EDX side, one of the things that we've looked at is, how are we transmitting and storing the data, right? Is our transport protocols always secure, right? Using HTTPS, things like that. Are our databases encrypted? Making sure that there's never a place where the data is sitting at rest in plain text and open. And then we look at how is that data handled? Who has access and why? I mean, you have to ask that question over and over again, and use a principle of minimizing access in all cases where possible, and making sure that any access is fit for the need for your customer's business, right? And so what are your authentication systems, and how long does that authentication last? If someone has been approved for access to data, is that permanent? Does it last forever? It shouldn't. That's something that needs to expire, and you need to go through those processes. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, it's how regularly are the security technologies and practices that you're using being reviewed and updated, because everybody starts at step one, and you move to step 2 and step 3, and you continue to implement the changes and best practices within the industry, understanding that tomorrow, next year, they're going to change, and you need to be able to keep up with it. And so that is a process that shifting your security focus to the beginning of your design and putting it into your architecture, constantly reviewing, making it a part of your operations, is something that is again, getting back to the question of managed services, and when do I focus on my business versus letting someone else focus on theirs? This is an area where we say, okay, well, if we're going to bring cloud solutions to the market, security is part of our business.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds like both with Nokia and EDX, you've sort of considered all of the options and potentials for some data security, and I know that that's always one of the big questions when anyone talks about cloud is security. So thank you for sort of expanding upon that for us. It looks like we're coming up close to time for the day. So I just wanted to pose sort of one last question at this point, and that would be for those watching, are there any specific resources or maybe books or anything that you've utilized during the pandemic to sort of deal with the effects of the pandemic? Maybe you have a website you go to, or maybe there's a specific book, or just sort of anything that you've used as a resource. It could even be if you've added a new app for better communication within your company, anything that you can sort of throw out there that might be of assistance or relevance to dealing with COVID.
I would recommend the Revenue Collective podcast. The Revenue Collective is like a community for people who work in revenue or growth in the software as a service world. And it's been very interesting for me just to hear from other people in similar roles, to hear how COVID is impacting their business. And they also, if you remember, they publish benchmarking surveys to see how many people had a tough Q2, or how many people are laying off people in this area or not. So that's been a really useful resource, and I think their podcast is open to people who aren't members, so that would be my recommendation.
I've added it to my list.
I don't have any specific recommendation on a book or stuff, but like Flo said, I do listen to some of the podcasts where they are comparing, like Hope is one of them, Hope Through History, where they talk about, the past pandemic examples and stuff like that. In fact, if you look back in the history, the 1918 pandemic happened, at the time of the World War One, and there was, and that followed with the Great Depression and things like that. So there is, things like I look back and listen to, what are some of the lessons from that time, and it's an interesting perspective that they share. So not necessarily on a COVID thing, but it's, at times we have lived like this in the past pandemic, and what were some of the things that we as society did. Of course, technology has come a long way in 100 years, but still about the human behavior and how human approach the situation. That's an interesting aspect.
Just real quickly, I will echo the recommendations to, look at the kind of real-time reporting that is being done. I mean, a lot of excellent reporting on the pandemic and on economics and the economy and the impact of, this on societal change and, changes in work and all these things. The books will be written in a few years. And right now, the podcasts and our journalists and reporters are doing fantastic work.
Excellent. I appreciate the resources that you've all shared. So to end on this note is sort of a little different than how you would normally end like a panel discussion if you were at an in-person event, right? Usually you'd have the ability to go and talk to the presenter or the speaker and have some interaction, but obviously there's not that really available here. So for those who may have questions or want to connect, would LinkedIn be the best platform for everyone here to sort of reach out if they wanted to connect with you?
Yeah, that works for me.
Perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn is my social media vice. If you send me a message on LinkedIn, I'll get it.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today and watching this panel discussion. And I want to thank Florence, Vikas, and Lauren for joining and sharing how their companies have been coping with the changes brought on by COVID-19. And with that, I will end this panel discussion. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Have an excellent day.
Thank you for having us. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.